Professor Ngure Mwachofi has been a guest on this show before. He is a retired professor. He's a retired professor, and he's a consultant as well. The last time he was here, he had a guitar. Today, he has no guitar.
No, I didn't bring the guitar. I thought the law is so intriguing. And last time I realized we ran out of time.
Yes, yes. So we'll talk about something else.
We'll have a guitar day.
Very good. Today, we are talking about the rule of law. Has the law become a preserve for a few privileged individuals? That's a conversation. City, please welcome the Prof with the day's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for this week come from the country of Eritrea. It's what you call a unitary party government. Unitary, as other people will refer to it derogatorily as a dictatorship.
Unitary party government.
Yeah, ndio party ni moja.
Single party.
President ni moja.
All right.
Let me just ask a question. Take it as a puzzle.
Okay.
Does anybody know what the currency in Eritrea is called? Ours is called shilling. Do you know what theirs is called? Most people will not know. But in case you do, tell us.
Rupee.
That is a very good attempt. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give you half.
Half for attempts. If you know, type, what's the currency of Rria?
I want to say dinar, but
you get a quarter.
Dirham.
This person has gone historical on us. In fact, almost prehistoric. You do. No, it's not a currency that you'll get to know about. That's why I asked. But let me just tell them. It's called a nakfa.
that's what I was going to say next.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what you're going to say next.
I mean, you'd have just given me a chance. That was the next thing that was coming off my tongue.
Nafka was next.
Yes.
Nafka.
Yeah.
Nafka. Next on you.
Sounds like NASCAR.
Yes, it does.
Nafka or nakfa?
Nakfa.
Nakfa.
Yes, Nakfa.
Nakfa. Okay. Sansana, the proverb.
The proverb, a fly that does not listen often follows the corpse to the grave.
A fly that does not listen often follows the corpse to the grave.
Pip, 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 grave.
Ndani.
Ndani.
That sounds a little like the proverb the previous time, where you're thinking about the allegiance to the idea. You are so caught up in your own interest, and you hold on to that which is pleasant.
Yes.
And even if it is dying, you won't know it is dying. And you end up,
Umeshikilia.
yeah.
Stuck there.
So that is the idea, I think, that the fly that doesn't listen ends up in the grave. So it's simply, it can be interpreted in so many ways. That's the first one is what I presented, the idea that you don't listen because the reason for not listening is you are too caught up in self-interest. And the fly is always looking for good things to enjoy. And so whatever warnings there may be, that's not a good idea, it won't listen, and then it becomes clear why that was not a good idea when it is
A little too late.
Yeah, yeah.
Prof, you're here this morning so we can have a debate.
Yes.
Many times in the country, when we see people breaking the law and how they are treated and handled, the law is clear, as they say.
Yeah.
This is the law, and these are the consequences for not obeying the law. And this is the procedure for you to face the consequences for not obeying the law. But in many times, we see as if it's applied selectively. There are those that face the full brunt of the law, and then there are those who just get a slap on the wrist for breaking the law. But is that the case, really?
Well,
Or is it just a matter of perception?
I think that it's not a matter of perception. I think we can think about the difference between what we think the law is, what it actually becomes when it is being practiced. And secondly, the idea that law is meant to be a balancer, to make sure that all interests are balanced. It is the arbiter wherever there is a conflict of interests. But now the question is, that it is structured to determine how everything is going to work, however structured, what happens is that ideally you'd hope that law is something that everybody knows, because if all members of society have to live in harmony because they are following the law, doesn't it follow that people should have knowledge of the law?
Yeah.
And I'm arguing that actually it is not the case, because law oftentimes is taught only at the university level, or when people are in an institution like taking the accounting exams, they would need to have contract law so they know how to transact. But people who are transacting, who are business people, they have to get a lawyer. So we have a system which is meant to work well, but in practice it doesn't. And that's the sense in which it becomes a preserve for a few people. Take a good example from our new constitution, where citizens are allowed to recall the members of parliament before the 5 years are over. But it is the same members of parliament who are expected to write the law on how that process, to do the rules on how that process would work. Effectively, it is like saying, well, if I do anything wrong, allow me to tell you how you're going to punish me. So clearly, the person who is in that position is the one dictating the terms. Another example, a real example now from my student. He told me, Prof, I live in Kisumu and I come to class once on Thursdays. So what I do is I go to the bank and I get enough $50 bills, and I drive at whatever speed I need to, and anywhere I stopped, I just dish the 50. So you're looking at this guy because he can afford. How about people who may not afford that? So it is clear that the practice of law does work like that. In cases of situations like land dispute, I remember a case, and I wish I had looked it up. It was a case where the judge, it was a case of a competition between three people who own land, but some rich guy came and bought the land. However, that was done, so they went to court and said, this is our ancestral land, we inherited this. And I remember the judge using the term locus standi. He says the three people had no locus standi. So what you have there is a situation where these people are ignorant of the law, and the person who bought the land has either good lawyers or is aware of the law, and therefore ended up with that. So in practice, the idea that people don't always know the law, and it is known by a few, you can use an example of what if, a few questions, what if the same way people learn hygiene from when they are young, wash your hands and all that, what if people learned law in that same sense?
Who would make them learn it, Professor?
Who would make them learn it?
Yes.
It would be part of the curriculum.
Why is it not part of the curriculum?
Exactly the point, that the law is, in theory, meant to balance competing interests, but my view is that law functions more to control rather than to regulate.
But what aspect of the law would you want to be taught throughout in curriculum?
I think if you
So
look,
you say the law, remember it's not just one statute. They're very...
yeah, we have many statutes.
Can I chime in there?
We are,
Can I chime
please
in?
do. Yeah,
I would start with the Bill of Rights.
I agree.
Something simple, because you start by, people don't know their rights, and when they don't know their rights, and they don't even know they have their rights, they don't know how many rights there are,
Yeah.
it's very easy for those rights to be violated. So things will pass you by. But once you understand, the knowledge of those rights empowers you now to understand more about the law and what it envisioned for you as a citizen.
And I would push that if that was the case, as in giving people the basics, then you can expect a good break on corruption. Let's take the example of fines. Traffic fines are 10,000 for this infraction. Now, when they go up to 20, if police officer would tell you, do you want to pay now or do you want to defend yourself? Unataka kujitetea? Mbele. Yeah. So you figure, now it was 10, but now it is 30. I better give the 5,000. But what if somebody understood law enough, the basics that we are talking about here? Maybe you'd ask the police officer, do you really think you are doing your job? I mean, you left your home this morning saying, I'm going to serve my country. Here you are. You know that you cannot be the judge. Your job is to write me up, and then we'll see what happens. So you can see a relationship there in terms of what if people understood. But oftentimes, the absence of knowledge of law leaves people in fear. And this idea that ignorance of the law is no defense. It would make a lot more sense if it were the case that people had the basics, so that to think of them as being ignorant is not because they are stupid. Rather, the system has not encouraged the knowledge of this law.
True. But I'd argue that people have the basics. However rudimentary the understanding of it could be, but people have the basics. That's why people demonstrate all the time saying Hakietu.
Yes, true.
Because they have an idea what their right is.
Yes.
I have a right as a citizen of this country to receive services from my
Yeah.
government, from the chief, from the police officer, from the DO, county commissioner. I have a right. I have a right not to be harassed by police officers.
It's
You're stopped and you say, no, I know my rights. Take me if you want to take me to the police station. Take me to the
You'll
police
be
station.
bundled into that vehicle so fast.
But it's not because people don't know.
You see,
People know that they have a right.
Eric, I'm agreeing with you, and that's why I've talked about the bundling, because it's even those who are given by law the mandate to ensure that the law is actually put into practice. They break it. If they also had internalized, because in my mind they haven't internalized it. For them, it's like a tool for subversion. Okay, when somebody stands up and points the law, that should act as a halt, and they should realize, okay, here this conversation is different. But no.
The best example I can give you is a true story. Somebody was telling me that people were arrested for alcohol consumption, the illicit alcohol. And one of them was just a visitor visiting his cousin. He doesn't even drink. So they are...
But he was in the company of people who are drinking.
Yes, so they were huddled in the Land Rover, and that big container was put in the Land Rover.
Exhibit.
Yes. So as they get closer to the police station, the police officer gets a big cup and fetches, and he tells him, "Shikilia." So he holds on to his cup, and they get in there. And of course, he's written up for that.
See, yeah, he's carrying the exhibit.
So think of if he understood the law and the whole concept of exhibit and how he'd reject that, and maybe at the point of even writing. But these people are shaken.
At what level or on what platforms would we say then it was necessary for folks to get a basic understanding of the law across board? Where are we introducing this? School, primary school, secondary school?
I would
where
have
would this
no
happen?
problem even from kindergarten, because the idea is to have people submerged in a place where we understand the law, everybody understands it is right. I think then the level field will be available so that people are having a real conversation.
Okay, so then what changes as a result of people having this more than basic understanding of the law? What differences would we see if this actually happened?
I think people would be operating on a point where you are not looking at somebody as being powerful because he has this mystery.
Who, the lawyer now?
Whoever is speaking to you, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a lawyer, whether you are negotiating business, and you are operating not with the ignorance of law, but you are operating aware that this is my right, and I know you are wrong when you are telling me this and that. I mean, how often do people use scary tactics for people knowing that they don't understand, and therefore they'll live in that fear? So I think there's a relationship between law and class, because what we didn't ask is who creates this law and for whose purpose. And the creators of law, if you look at it, particularly if you examine the Western origins of law, the English common law and all that, it has a lot to do with the class system, where you are looking at how people are going to make sure that those who own property can actually manage to protect their property. So law is oftentimes about protection of property. And if you look at law enforcement, it is mostly about protection of property. So who are the property owners? Not too many people in a society where there's such differences.
So it's a tool for power.
It is a tool for power, essentially.
How it was introduced initially.
Yes.
But over time,
and not
has
only tool
evolved
for
then.
power, but also who does the proposition of how it would look like. Because if everybody is involved, they say, we don't want to have, can we have a provision that takes care of us?
but over time that has evolved. And that's why there's a whole issue of democracy and participatory democracy, where even though there's, a certain group of people who are going to make the law, to write the law, they must seek consent of the population.
Very true.
Right? So when you're doing a constitution, is this agreement between the people on how they're going to govern themselves or be governed, right? The law, when you're making the law, there has to be an aspect where you've gone to the people and told them this is the need, this is the solution, the law, and this is the mode of implementing this law and the mode of enforcing the law, right?
That's correct.
So people are involved now. Principally, the power is not only with the writer of the law.
Agree. The point I would raise here is that, in fact, I'll go back to the previous example I gave, the recall clause in the Constitution. Why is there a recall clause? So people know that they can actually decide. They don't have to put up with the 5 years of an incompetent member of parliament. But remember, the second part says the members of parliament are the ones who will determine how this process is executed. That's one. Secondly, again, back to the same question, because people are not aware of the law, they are not even used to thinking about it that much, which is why you have phrases like Kenya ina wenyewe, because they are recognizing that although it is true, all that you are saying, that they have a right, it is true, however, they know that it doesn't work. Now, this they know it doesn't work, is that an imagination or is it a reality?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is look around, haven't you, Ngure? Look, what are we talking about? That we're asking people to have an idea of the law, essentially, to know how it functions, so that you may then be able to do one of two things: defend yourself or counter what somebody else may have said to you if you know that otherwise to be true.
Yes.
But this is the same society in which we're operating, whereby somebody could have gone through the judicial system, be convicted of a crime, be sentenced in terms of punishment, but is still walking out free because all avenues have not been exhausted. It is within that same society that we're asking folks to have a knowledge of the law so that you can then use it to your advantage. Do we blame individuals? And I think at some point we could, who would then say, why would I need to know? Of what use would it be to me? Because if I have a few extra shillings in my pocket, then I'm guaranteed an outcome just like this other person.
And then you bring in the bribing element where you can tell the judiciary to do to make a decision in your favor.
Sure, and look, I don't say that two wrongs never make a right. Absolutely not. But we can imagine a situation where we're impressing the importance of knowledge of the law on individuals who are existing in the same space where this knowledge is not practiced to its end. How can we do that and still expect a result that is...
Well, if you think of the alternative that we are living in, where people don't know law and don't think they need to know law, instead they live in fear, and you are thinking of the purpose of any society, you have a society which should live freely. Innovativeness is a product of how free people think, and they are able to do things because they know how they will go about the process. For example, if you are registering a company, you need to understand a little bit about the law in terms of registering. You need to know your limitations. You are starting a business. There are laws that say if you are having a bar, it must be several meters away from school and all those things. But we see all these rules being flouted, oftentimes because the person breaking the law is the one who is well-to-do. And so the point that the law becomes a preserve for people who are privileged is because we recognize that law is a tool that functions to regulate the way people
So what's broken here is not a knowledge issue. It's not a knowledge issue. It is an enforcement issue and an implementation issue.
It's true.
It is people abusing the law.
That's correct. But let's think of the law not as if it is an entity there that can be abused or misused, etc., etc. But let's think of it as one coming into life because of the practices that people are going through. When Kivuta Kibwana was being impeached by the MCAs, and Judge Mumbi Ngugi declared a win for Kivuta Kibwana, the point was very clear that you are the lawmakers, You cannot just decide that you are going to remove this guy because you are not happy that he has not given you opportunities to use the money or whichever way you use. When you have MCAs who become, they are literally taking hostage, the governor hostage. We want this, he doesn't want, now we can plan, we can have a plan to impeach him. So what happens when they go to court? And I'm saying the practicing of that process by Judge Ngugi is the process of making law become alive. In other words, we can't think of law as if it is there to regulate things. It becomes alive when somebody is making a determination by saying you cannot do this or that.
But even before that, Professor,
yeah,
you see, what you're saying is absolutely true.
Yeah.
But the term socialization comes to my mind.
Socialization?
Yes, there's a process of legal socialization. And everything that has to do with the law and our interaction with it from the earliest possible times.
Yeah.
Which then forms our beliefs and attitudes towards the law.
Yes.
Okay? So then what we like referring to here is our lived experience. Now, if it doesn't follow what you are saying, and I apologize for interrupting you, but when you said this, then I realized, you see, we then get to a point where we have legal cynicism, because you look at the law and so that you actually then create an alternative in your head as to how you want to deal with it.
How to circumvent.
Exactly. Or find an easier way of approaching it, which is causes less harm to you. It doesn't mean it's right. And the problem with that is that it is worst possible form. It brings about moral disengagement. So right and wrong become all intertwined.
And you can't differentiate.
Yes. And it's now a question of what is most convenient. So this isn't right, this isn't wrong. The law even doesn't feature.
Yeah. In other words, if law is there at all, let's see how it interacts with my objective.
Yes.
But then that convenience is supported by a lack of proper enforcement. Because you see, if your convenience, the convenience that you chose, is contrary to the law, and there is no law enforcer that comes to bring you back and show you, no, this is the law, and this is the consequence that you have to pay for not obeying the law, for not going by the law, then tomorrow you'll repeat that new convenience.
That's why it goes back to his point.
It becomes your own...
It does, Eric.
That's why...
It does, and you're right. And you're right. You see, if you look at the law, when it isn't enforced, as you say correctly, what I think is not realized is you make the law illegitimate.
Yep.
Yes.
Now, that illegitimacy is what brings about our cynicism. We figure if this is what the thing is, we know it to be right, and this is what we're seeing.
And your earlier point that it is a cultural thing,
yes,
that people's mindset and their assumptions about what is right and what is not is part of all this. So that then we see law not as if it was there an entity that speaks, it says, hey, don't do this, don't do that. Rather, it is we humans who already have a desire for that harmony, and we say, why don't we write it up so that people can be guided by this? But now, when there's an issue and there's an interpretation that is required, that interpretation is the one that now may go to enforce that idea or undermine the idea based on who's judging and what kind of morality somebody has.
Let's create wider awareness on the law, so that people can then understand the law. And you say that if more and more people know the law better, then it will equalize. It will serve the purpose of being the equalizer.
Yeah, let's use a different analogy then we come to law. If we want a healthy nation, we'll be better off to encourage the learning of living healthy at a very early stage. If it started at kindergarten, that's good. So people know the right foods to eat, exercising being important, and so all that. I think you can make the same argument about law, that if people understood law, because you want to have a society in harmony, make law the regulator of this harmony, be preserved for everyone. And I'm saying that it doesn't seem to be the case. If you take the case of employer-employee relationship, oftentimes people are hired, they don't know much about their rights for being hired, so they don't ask questions, so they sign the contract, they're happy to have a job. Then down the road, they realize that what they thought they will have is not there, but they can see that the people in the higher positions are doing better. I think that would have made a difference if people did learn law, and then they would be reading the contract differently from if they didn't. Workplace harassment, people fearing annoying the harasser because they might lose their job. If they understood law, even the harasser would not attempt that because they know that these people are already aware of their rights. And so in some ways, I'm saying that if people understood law early, that process alone will regulate what CT was pointing out earlier, the idea of how people behave, because we are looking at behavior, culture, what is it a product of? The different desires people want to fulfill and the different consequences that they may get if they went the wrong direction.
You know, the socialization process, however, doesn't come unburdened. It comes with stigma. When you talk about harassment, the hour just before yours, we were talking about gender-based violence. Part of the problem is because of the stigma attached to gender-based violence, many people don't report it.
True.
So something which should be exposed and brought into the full glare of the light is actually dimmed. So it is, the perpetration continues. Now, it's the same with something like the law. If your lived experience is something uncomfortable when it comes to approaching and interacting with police officers, the likelihood of you reporting anything is slim unless it's extremely dire. And if it's a problem that is of a personal nature, then one will probably find an alternative. Because you see, that mindset that moves away from the law and finds solutions easy to itself, it's a mindset. Once it's acquired, it becomes the norm.
But remember, you're correct only because you are analyzing this from the state that we are already in.
Yes.
As opposed to a state where, in fact, there was law awareness earlier. So I'm agreeing with your point that you start with something which, if it is practiced for a long time, the practice becomes the normal. It gets normalized.
Yes.
But initially it is arbitrary. You decide you're going to do this, and then
I
everybody
agree.
is falling. Then it becomes normal. And once it is normal, it is that who does things right that is seen as the odd guy. Like the guy who does not accept bribes. So what's wrong with you?
Yes.
This guy has been sitting in this job and others are getting rich, but he is not.
Precisely, because that's what I call moral disengagement. You see, if I look at just the very nature of the law doesn't exist because people are intrinsically good. No, in my mind.
The other way around.
Yes, it's the other way. It exists because it is understood that people will do wrong.
Yes.
So you need a structure within which you can ensure. Yes, now, if the enforcement of that particular structure is faulty, now, we are where we are, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That those who are supposed to be the vanguards of this right doing actually perpetuate a system whereby it's all right to do wrong. And that's why you're met with chagrin when you meet somebody who says, well, I'm not going to take a bribe. And the initial response is, good God,
what is the matter with you?
Yes. Yeah.
And it should be the opposite.
Yes.
You see? And so then I guess the question is, how do you start to unfurl? How do you start to claw back at some of these things? The law that is meant to guide. Just exactly. We had a conversation just a few minutes ago at the last hour when somebody or someone who has been put in a position to essentially protect and then promote the issues around disability is the one who is actually going and taking those things for themselves. Yeah. The person that we should go to say, how about you promote and protect for other people in the country? So it's an accepted thing. You wouldn't say that, but people know, okay, we are bringing this vehicle in because you somehow got that certificate. It's not frowned upon. CT has said some things, and oftentimes I'll say, CT, actually stop it. But he said, no, we like our impunity.
Actually,
we do. You, if it was repugnant, you would know. We enjoy that bad manners kind of thing. Because if we didn't, we would see that there was a lot of pushback to say, actually, no, this thing, we shouldn't do it. But what do? We laugh about it. We say, okay, it's no big deal, when it is a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that explains the state of our nation. I call it national consensus, or a culture that has been shifting away from having this moral obligation and getting rid of that obligation so that you can have what is good for your own self. Give you a simple example of somebody who tells you, I have a child in Africa that I've sponsored. True story again. An American telling me they have a child in Africa. And after a few months tells me, you know what I found out? I used to send the money, the principal received the money, but nothing has been given to the child. And you ask, how does the principal live with himself, having this poor child, money is being sent for the poor child, but he continues to get better by maintaining himself and using somebody else's money. So the question is, how did our society shift to have those kinds of values? And I think we can do comparison and say 40 years ago things were not like that, and that they have changed and they continue to get worse. So we can't really talk about the law being a preserve for a few without recognizing the social, psychological dynamics that are in play, and how people who are in leadership positions become the role models that could otherwise be presenting the right thing but end up doing the exact opposite.
So we're saying, Prof, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are we saying, Prof, that if we're saying that the law is a preserve of the few, we're talking about this preserve then being lived out, monetarily? You can pay for something to go your way.
Yeah.
Are we then saying that if the rest of society was in a position to spend this money as well, that they would also enter into this club?
I've had people
as opposed to the opposite, whereby whether you had money or not, you're going to do what the law says. If more people were in that bracket where you had enough to spend, would we see more people then using this preserve?
I've had that point before. It's really, can I buy the law, or can I buy the right to be wrong because I've paid for it?
But Prof, it's worse than that.
Which is very close to the...
It's actually much worse than that. If we look at the examples of Kenyan, every time I'm at a traffic light, I see it happening. There are people who ride motorbikes who just do what they like.
Yes.
The rest of you actually waiting for the lights to turn, and they're just the police are
and the
right
police officers there. Yes.
And they're just crisscrossing as you see fit. So the likelihood of being hit by one or hitting one is very high. And then, depending on a weekend, the lights are red. People will be hooting at you for stopping.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're thinking, are they not seeing
Red
right? You see, one of the things about compliance and living according to the law is you cooperate with the legal authorities or those who apply it, isn't it? But the complete subversion of it is what we see. We are complying and cooperating with the authorities because the authorities break the law, so are we. So everyone at their level, you don't need to actually have fiscal means. No. In your little way, you will break the law. In the same manner that you have passengers getting into a matatu that is already full. Full, yes.
In Tanzania, when they stop you, even the passengers who are in there are fined for having broken that law, aside from
even in Kenya, every once in a while, when we near the opening of schools, it happens.
Yeah, but now, if that doesn't happen, what we are really talking about is that we are analyzing a story in a society that is already broken. And because it is broken, we are trying to figure out, so why does the law seem to work? And I would say the law actually has turned out to be like a light switch. Turn it on, turn it off, depending on when you want to see and when you don't want to see.
But if I'm to be positive, Professor, I'd say the law is working. If it wasn't working, we wouldn't be having this discussion, because the fact that you can know there's something wrong...
To some extent.
Exactly. It's because you understand...
Seen the right...
Yes, you know what ought to be. You know it isn't, but you haven't lost sight of it. Because if I'd lost sight of it completely, I would not be participating in this discussion.
Yeah, so...
Because my mind is made up and I know what I'm going to do.
Yes. So we are talking about a continuum in which everybody's motive or desire or the selfish intentions are in some ways controlled to some extent and sometimes let free depending on whether it is convenient or not. And you are hoping that a society has harmony where people know that certain things are wrong. When you look at some of the systems that have been introduced in Kenya, like the credit card system, the M-Pesa system, the number of fraudsters that are looking to defraud you are just so many, because culturally people feel like if you can get it, it's fine. It doesn't matter how. I mean, the end justifies the means. Other cultures will be different. I mean, you go to places where people know that they pick a newspaper and they put the money in there and they walk away with the newspaper, and the owner is actually not there. He's stepping out there, and people don't just walk away. Why? They have that moral obligation. In Japan, when you find a family decides to actually go to the police and report that their son has done something, and in Kenya, you're looking at people who are going to bribe the police so that what their son has done Yeah, you're looking at two competing value systems, and the question is, how do you maintain the value? And I would argue it's not even the law, it is a question of all these institutions, as I pointed out earlier, from nursery school, and people walk away with understanding and constantly redefining themselves in ways that are consistent with the harmony.
Professor, you and I lived in a time when
Yes.
the very thing about newspapers existed in this country.
Yes,
I participated in buying a paper, looking for the change, taking mine and leaving it.
Yes.
And I wasn't alone.
yes. So the question then, what has made the turn? And I think it all starts from the leadership. If you see the kinds of things that leaders have done to undermine the process, whether it is assassination.
What is this thing that you think the leadership has done?
It is the selfishness in which the idea that I do what I'm doing because I'm in charge. And we can trace this back from 1963. 1963 we gain independence. 1965 we have the first assassination of Pio Gama Pinto. Why did it happen? Pio was a very clear-minded Goan Kenyan who used to use some of his finances to help the ordinary people. He was very well involved in the movement. And I think there was fear on the part of the administration that this guy is getting to be too popular. He's known.
He was also leftist in leaning.
Yeah, the idea of leftist in leaning, I find those to be real labels that are used conveniently to undermine the possibilities that people are coming up with. But the same way people call Kagame a dictator.
Prof, leftist in leaning, I don't know why people think it's negative. Someone who leans towards socialism, how is that negative?
That's why it is useful to avoid left and right capitalism and socialism, because when you do that, we are already inviting people to see them in terms of Russia versus the USA.
At that point, it was a convenient thing to label someone.
Yeah.
And then basically giving a dog a bad name.
It was, but I see the real threat. What do you think the real threat of Russia was to America in terms of ideology?
Well, after the end of World War II, at the end of the World War II, you have Russia and all the allies of Europe fighting against Germany, Italy, and Japan, right? So there's the start of Cold War. And the Cold War really is nothing other than simply the idea that the USA and its allies, Britain, France, and so on, they are very interested in making sure that they have an influence so people don't adopt this Russia-like system. In order to undermine it, they have to make sure that they discourage that.
Question.
Now, there's a very good book.
Why bother with it?
Let me explain why. There's a book titled The Reds and the Blacks. It's the fear of looking at Kenya as if it was going to fall onto the Russian influence. And if you're familiar with the Russia hospital in Kisumu, it was built with funding from the Soviet Union at the time. So it is like a struggle between Kenya, which is now getting rid of capitalism, if you think that's what was happening, and the people who are already benefiting in this system and who like to defend it, and so who helps them to maintain it, and who is the troublemaker, the POs and other people who felt bad. 1975, I was teaching in Taita High School, and JM has been assassinated, JM Kariuki. So you're looking at 1963, 1965, Pio Gamapito. All these assassinations, I think they represent the fear of our people in power who felt strongly that these other people are going to undermine the chances of their motives being fulfilled. What were their motives? They desire that they would like to be rich. They desire that they would like to step in the shoes of the colonizer and enjoy the same privileges that were there before. So my point, I think, is that we can't really discuss the local politics without attaching this to the broader story. If we talk, for example, about the assassination of Lumumba, and Mobutu is the person who gets into power, or whether we are talking about Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, every time you trace who are playing with a new dictator, it is the people who like to see that Africa does not stand on its own feet to be able to establish a system that the West can no longer continue to manipulate. So we are talking about law and advantages or disadvantages, but essentially what we are really talking about is there must be a serious interest to maintain a broken down system as opposed to maintaining a system that works.
That functions.
So its lack of functioning becomes a celebration. Look at Africans, they can't even handle their own country.
So let's go there and
Yeah.
sort them out.
But part of it is they can't handle their own country. That becomes a justification for why it is important to help. We are here to help with this. We are here to help with that. And I'm thinking, okay, who helped you to where you are, and why can't we help ourselves from where we are? If your present situation is not based on getting help from out there, how is it helpful that we are getting help from outside? In other words, there's this dependency system that we invent within ourselves and continue to want to get help and undermine the idea that our own people could be productive enough. But hey, wait, we are getting $1 million from the USA, we are getting 100 million from Britain, and so on and so on. Then we are indebted to the point that we are today. And all this still relates back to the question of how free people may or may not be to do what is good for themselves without having to be directed by outsiders.
Prof, let me give you a perspective. Huh?
Okay.
What is it? Let me frame in the form of a question. What do you think it is that makes most people work as hard as they do and do the things they do?
If you give me an example of a hardworking person, are you talking about a farmer? Are you talking about a banker? Are you talking about...
No,
Then
I'm talking about
that-
anybody.
People work hard
Anyone, whatever it is you're doing. Why do we do the things we do?
because there are two things. One, the meaning of life for an individual is based on how meaningful they see themselves.
Yes.
If you are a father in a family, and your family knows that you have nothing, that you are constantly being given money, and whatever they're enjoying is coming from out there, I think the amount of respect your family will have will be less than...
Precisely. We're always seeking to find a way of making our lives better.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that makes it better is money. Now, someone gets you to understand that the ethos of hard work doesn't need to apply. All you need to do is to find yourself in a convenient position, and it is possible for you to acquire it. Because the question is also asked, there's no ready answer for it. So
Yeah.
I'll ask it anyway. Why do people want to accumulate? Where on earth are you going to take it? Again,
The answer for me is that people want to accumulate because they become prisoners of accumulation. You have so much money now, you have the fear of losing it. And the more you have, the better you feel that now, even if a little is lost, you are still okay.
Protecting what you have.
In other words, humans create systems which then the systems begin to control the very human. And you can see that even in technology. You create a technology, the technology now sets the imperative of how you have to behave. I wrote this program, but now it requires me to put a comma. Without that comma, it won't run. Yeah? So we live in this paradox. It's a circular system.
Prof,
Yeah.
thank you very much for joining us today. It's good to have some of these debates constantly so we can think and open up our minds and thoughts. Professor Ngure Mwachofi is a consultant and a retired associate professor. He's been our guest. We'll be talking about the law. Has the law become a preserve for a few?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.